Euzubillahimineşşeytanirracim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Elhamdülillahi Rabbil alemin. Ve salatu ve selamu ala Resulina Muhammedin ve ala alihi ve sahbihi ecmain. Radiyallahu anna ve ankum ve an kâfetil müminin. Rabbena atina min ledunke rahmeten ve hi lena min emrina raşada. We are reading from Ihya Ulumuddin, the chapter on Sabr and Shukr. So this is the last title dealing with Sabr. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll start from here. Previously, like we read this section, half of it, but because I thought it will not be good start from the half, so we will start from the beginning of this section, inshallah ta'ala. And there are some new friends who joined us this year. So this will be also good for them. This way they will know like how Imam Ghazali makes his argument and how he substantiates and grounds it. Bayanu dawa'i sabri wa ma yusta'anu bihi alayhi. So this chapter explains the medicine for sabr, for patience, for forbearance, for endurance, وَمَا يُسْتَعَانُ بِهِ عَلَيْهِ, and what's helpful to gain patience. What can help you, to make you more patient, more enduring patiently. اعلم أن الذي أنزل الداء أنزل الدواء ووعد الشفاء. Know that the one who created the illness, he also created the medication for it. And he also promised the healing, the cure for the illness. So Allah Ta'ala is the one, who creates all sorts of illnesses, but he at the same time creates the medication, the solution, the treatment for them as well. So he does not leave illnesses without any cure, but we need to search for the cure. We need to search for the treatment. So there is no illness without any treatment, without any cure for it. فالصبر وإن كان شاقا أو ممتنعا فتحصيله يمكن بمعجون العلم والعمل. So patience, although it's very difficult, it's very challenging, it's even impossible, like mumtani'. Sometimes patience is very difficult and sometimes almost like impossible. فَتَحْصِيلُهُ يُمْكِن, but acquiring it is possible. How? بِمَعْجُونِ الْعِلْمِ وَالْعَمَلِ. With the medication of knowledge and practice, ilm and amal. So if you have this ma'joon, this mixture of ilm and amal, so if you mix them, then this medication will give you sabr. فالعلم والعمل هما الأخلاط التي منها تركب الأدوية لأمراض القلوب كلها. But the mixture of ilm and amal is not only a good cure, good treatment for the illness of sabr, but at the same time, it's good for all kinds of illnesses in the heart. So every illness in the heart is cured by the mixture of ilm and amal, knowledge and practice. ولكن يحتاج كل مرض إلى علم آخر وعمل آخر. However, every specific illness in the heart requires a specific type of knowledge and specific type of practice. So there is a general rule that every illness in the heart is treated by a mixture of ilm and amal, but for every particular illness, you need a particular ilm and particular amal to cure it. وكما أن أقسام الصبر مختلفة فأقسام العلل المانعة منه مختلفة. So because there are different types of sabr, also there are many obstacles, very diverse obstacles in front of sabr as well. So there are different types of sabr, and there are different types of obstacles before acquiring sabr. So there isn't like a single reason or there is a single obstacle in front of sabr. وإذا اختلفت العلل اختلف العلاج. So if the causes of an illness is different, then the cure, the treatment must also be different. So depending on the type of illness, there must be a specific type of medication for it. So the medication depends on the type of cause that causes a particular illness, because the purpose of medication is to remove the cause of illness. إذ معنى العلاج مضادة العلة وقمعها, because the purpose of medication is to be the opposite of the cause of illness, and to uproot it, completely delete it. So that's the purpose of the medication. واستيفاء ذلك مما يطول. However, full explanation or the complete explanation of this takes long time and space. What's the relationship between cause and the medication? And when causes change, the causes of the illness change, the medication also change. So the full explanation of it takes long time and space. ولكننا نعرف الطريقة في بعض الأمثلة. But he says we will show you the method by using some examples for it. فنقول, for this purpose, we are saying that إذا افتقر إلى الصبر عن شهوة البقاء مثلا وقد غلبت عليه الشهوة بحيث ليس يملك معها فرجه، أو يملك فرجه ولكن ليس يملك عينه، أو يملك عينه ولكن ليس يملك قلبه ونفسه، إذ لا تزال تحدثه بمقتضيات الشهوة ويصرفه ذلك عن المواظبة على الذكر والفكر والأعمال الصالحة. فنقول. So Imam Ghazali is giving an example for sabr, like when you need sabr. He says, إذا افتقر إلى الصبر عن شهوة البقاء. When someone needs sabr against sexual desires, وقد غلبت عليه الشهوة بحيث لا يملك معها فرجه. It's possible that his sexual desire may overcome to him and mislead him. أو يملك فرجه ولكن ليس يملك عينه. No, one may control his sexual desires but may not control his eyes, looking at haram. أو يملك عينه ولكن ليس يملك قلبه ونفسه. So one may control his eyes by stopping and looking at haram, but may not be able to control his heart, and his inner self. إذ لا تزال تحدثه بمقتضى الشهوة. How does this happen? This happens when one's inner self, nafs, always tells him to act according to his sexual desires. So there's a voice inside constantly telling him to act according to sexual desires, and he cannot silence it. So that's another example of a need for صبر ويصرفه ذلك عن المواظبة على الذكر والفكر والأعمال الصالحة. And these kind of problems, like not being able to control his sexual desires, in his body, or not being able to control the eye, and even if one controls the eye, not being able to control the heart, like these things, may hinder someone from constantly making dhikr of Allah Ta'ala, or contemplation, or performing good deeds, because he's busy with this temptations of sexual desires. What do you advise in this kind of situation? فنقول, so Imam Ghazali says that in this kind of situation, this is what I advise. قد قدمنا أن الصبر عبارة عن مصارعة باعث الدين مع باعث الهوى. He says that previously I have already explained that sabr consists of the conflict between religious motivation and hedonistic motivation. Okay, so on the one hand, there is hedonistic motivation, tempting people to act according to their hedonistic desires, al-hawa. And on the other hand, there is religious motivation, pushing people acting according to religion. So there is a conflict, between the two, and this is what sabr is about. وكل متصارعين أردنا أن يغلب أحدهما الآخر. And in this conflict, in this, both parties try to overcome the other side. فلا طريق لنا فيه إلا بتقوية من أردنا أن تكون له اليد العليا وتضعيف الآخر. So if you want to make one side overcome, defeat the other side, what you need to do? You need to strengthen, empower the side that you want to defeat the other side, and also weaken the party that you want to be defeated. Okay, so that's the strategy. That's the strategy. So there's a conflict inside of you, and you want one side overcome the other side. So what's the way to make the side that you want to triumph, to make it overcome the other side? You empower it and you weaken the other side. Okay. فلزمنا ها هنا تقوية باعث الدين وتضعيف باعث الشهوة. Therefore, what we are required to do is to support, to empower the religious motivation, and to weaken, undermine the hedonistic motivation, the temptation for following desires. So that's the strategy. فأما باعث الشهوة فسبيل تضعيفه ثلاثة أمور. So if we want to empower the religious motivation and weaken the hedonistic motivation, so how are we going to do it? Okay, what's the practical way of doing this? So Imam Ghazali says that the way to weaken or to undermine the hedonistic motivation is through three things. So he's gonna propose three methods, to undermine the hedonistic desires, because our goal is to weaken or undermine the power of hedonistic desires, the shahwa, and empower the opposite, so that the opposite overcomes the shahwa. So أحدهما, what are those three ways with which we can weaken the ba'ith al-shahwa, the hedonistic motivation? So the first one, أن ننظر إلى مادة قوته. We should look at the substance of its power? What's the source of the power of shahwa? Where does shahwa, where does hedonistic desire get its power? What's the ground for it? What's the essence of it? وهي الأغذية الطيبة المتحركة للشهوة من حيث نوعها ومن حيث كثرتها. So the source of hedonistic desires is الأغذية الطيبة, nice food, good food, المتحركة للشهوة, that instigates, tempts, or moves the desires من حيث نوعها ومن حيث كثرتها. And this may happen regarding the type of food and also the quantity of the food. Either the quality or the quantity of the food may support the shahwa, may empower the desires in one. فلا بد من قطعها بالصوم الدائم. So therefore, this kind of nutrition, this kind of food should be terminated through continuously fasting. Okay, مع الاقتصار عند الإفطار على طعام قليل في نفسه. But during the breakfast, when one ends the fasting during the iftar, one should eat very little. That's enough for himself, فقط, without excessively eating during the iftar. Also, ضعيف في جنسه, and the type of food he consumes should not be powerful, should not empower the shahwa of a person. فيحترز من اللحم والأطعمة المهيجة للشهوة. For this purpose, one should stay away from meat and also other types of food that motivates the shahwa of a person. So this is one way of undermining the power of the shahwa, because the source of the shahwa is the food one consumes, which strengthens, supports, and motivates those kind of desires. So you eliminate the cause for it. والثاني, and the second method to undermine hedonistic desires, قطع أسبابه المهيجة له في الحال. So terminating the causes that motivates hedonistic desires at the moment. So one looks at his conditions and identifies the causes that's motivating his or her desires. فإنه إنما يهيج بالنظر إلى مظان الشهوة, because the shahwa gets motivated when people look at the places that motivates the shahwa, that instigates the desires. إذ النظر يحرك القلب. Why this is so? Because gaze moves the heart. Looks move the heart. So looking at something has an impact on the heart, and it moves the heart. والقلب يحرك الشهوة. When qalb is moved, it moves the shahwa. Okay, so nazar causes qalb to move, and qalb causes shahwa to move. وهذا يحصل بالعزلة والاحتراز عن مزان عقول البصر على الصور المشتهات. So how can one stay away from this kind of situation that instigates, provokes one's shahwa, Imam Ghazali says this is by al-uzla. This is by abstention and also withdrawal from society, seclusion. This is through seclusion. والاحتراز عن مزان وقوع البصر عن الصور المشتهات, and also staying away from possible places where an eye may see images of what provokes one's shahwa. So not only looking at them, but also staying away from environments, from conditions where it's possible that one's eye may see those things that may provoke one's shahwa. فالفرار منها بالكلية, and one should completely run away from this kind of environments where his eye may see what provokes his shahwa. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, Rasulullah عليه الصلاة والسلام said, النظرة سهم مسموم من سهام إبليس. So he said that a gaze, a look, is a poisonous arrow from the arrows of shaitan. I mean, when one looks at something, and if that thing at which one looks, if it's haram, it has the impact of a poisonous arrow in one's heart, as if a poisonous arrow hit his heart when he looks at something haram that provokes his hedonistic desires. And Rasulullah made this kind of comparison between the two. So like being hit with a poisonous arrow, is compared to looking at something haram that provokes one's shahwa. وهذا سهم يسدده الملعون ولا ترس يمنع منه إلا تغميض الأجفان. وهذا سهم يسدده الملعون. So this is an arrow shot by the shaitan, the cursed shaitan. So the cursed shaitan, sends this arrow, this poisonous arrow to one. So this arrow is shooted, by this cursed shaitan. ولا ترس يمنع منه إلا طامد الأجفان. So there is no shield to protect one from this poisonous arrow of the eye, except closing the eyes, or lowering the gazes. أو الهرب من صوب رميه, or running away from its target, from its target area. فإنه إنما يرمي هذا السهم عن قوس الصور, because shaitan throws, shoots this arrow by using the arrow of images, the arrow of pictures. Okay, so those pictures, they are tools of shaitan from which it hits one's heart through, as if one's heart is hit by poisonous arrows when one looks at those pictures, those images. فإذا افتلت عن صوب الصور لم يصبك سهمه. But if you stay away from the reach of the impact of those pictures, those images, the arrows of shaitan will not be able to hit you. Why? Because you are away, from the reach of the impact of those pictures and images that provokes one's shahwa. So the second advice is about seclusion, is about staying away from the social environments that provokes the shahwa of people. So the first advice was eating less, in such a way that brings down the energy of the person, which provokes one's shahwa. The other one, staying away from circumstances that provokes one's shahwa, in particular the circumstances when one gets to see images or things that provokes one's shahwa. The third method to protect one from the from temptations of the shahwa and undermine the power of shahwa. So how do you undermine the power of shahwa, and how you protect yourself from the shahwa? So the third method for it, تسلية النفس بالمباح من الجنس الذي تشتهيه. Satisfying one's desires from lawful ones. But that lawful thing is the same kind nafs desires to get. So you offer to your nafs something from the same kind it desires. So this is another method to protect yourself from getting influenced or defeated by shahwa. So if you satisfy your nafs with mubah, with permissible, lawful things, then your nafs is not going to provoke you to satisfy your desires from haram, because you already have halal alternative for it. So there is no reason for one, to get involved in haram. So that's another method to protect yourself from getting defeated, from getting controlled by nafs. So offering to your nafs what's mubah will undermine its temptation to lead you to the haram, because nafs gets the halal alternative for it. وذلك بالنكاح, and it's through marriage. فإن كل ما يشتهيه الطبع ففي المباحات من جنسه ما يوني عن المحظورات منه. So this is a general rule which is very important. Anything that's human nature desires has its alternative in mubah, which removes the need to get involved in haram, in unlawful thing. So anything one's nafs, one's hedonistic self desires, which is unlawful, has a lawful halal alternative. And once you get this halal alternative, then your desire for the haram is removed from yourself. So this is a general rule. If there is anything haram and your nafs desires for it, there is a halal alternative for it. And you offer this halal alternative to your nafs, haram is removed from the list of your desires. وهذا هو العلاج الأنفع في أكثر حق الأكثر. So this is the most effective medication for most people. For most people, offering the nafs the halal alternative is the most effective solution. فإن قطع الغذاء يضعف عن سائر الأعمال, because the first method, which is eating less or cutting the food completely so that there is no power to desire something. So he says this may weaken somebody to perform good deeds, because if you eat very little, you have no power to do good deeds. Okay, if it will protect you from like hedonistic desires, but at the same time it will also remove your power to do anything good. ثم قد لا يقمع الشهوة في حق أكثر الرجال. But at the same time, eating little may not remove the hedonistic desires in many people. In many men, it's not enough, to remove the desires completely. So basically, Imam Ghazali's advice is offering the halal alternative as the most effective method. Those methods, they are also good, but they are not as effective as offering the halal alternative. ولذلك قال صلى الله عليه وسلم عليكم بالباءة فمن لم يستطع فعليه الصوم فإن الصوم له وجاء. So Rasulullah said, عليكم بالباءة, you should get married. فمن لم يستطع, those who cannot get married, they should fast. They should perform صوم. فإن الصوم له وجاء, because صوم, weakens the hedonistic desires. So here in this hadith, Rasulullah gave priority to marriage. So marriage, which offers the halal alternative to satisfying the desires and protecting people, from haram, undermining the desire to haram completely. So the best and most effective solution is marriage. But those who cannot do it, then as a second alternative, so fasting. Look at the priority list. So nikah comes first, some comes second. And Imam Ghazali explains what's the reason for it. Because fasting may weaken the individual himself, and he might not find power to do good deeds first. Second, and in some people, hunger is not so effective in controlling their desires. فهذه ثلاثة أسباب. So these are the three means, three causes of undermining the power of shahwa, the power of excessive hedonistic desires for unlawful things. So the first one, decreasing the food, the quality and the quantity of it. And the second one, staying away from circumstances which provokes one's shahwa, in particular where there is a possibility of looking at haram, at things that provokes one's shahwa. And the third is offering a mubah bedil, a lawful halal alternative to haram, and this is the most effective one. So فهذه ثلاثة أسباب. So these are the three reasons. فالعلاج الأول هو قطع الطعام يضاهي قطع العلف عن البهيمة الجموح وعن الكلب الضاري ليضعف فتسقط قوته. So the first medication, which is cutting the food, it is similar to cutting the food of how should I say, a rebellious an uncontrollable animal or a wild dog, so that its power gets weakened. Okay, so if there is a horse, let's say, you cannot control, or there is a wild dog you cannot control, how do you educate, how do you domesticate that horse or that dog? By giving little food, so that they lose their power. So this is one way of educating the horse or the dog. They lose their power and then they become easily controllable. So you do the same thing to yourself to control your shahwa. والثاني يضاهي تغييب اللحم عن الكلب وتغييب الشعير عن البهيمة حتى لا تتحرك بواطنها بسبب مشاهدتها. And the second way of undermining the shahwa, which is staying away from circumstances that provokes one's shahwa, the seclusion, it is comparable to removing the meat from the dog, and also removing the barley from the animal, so that there is no desire inside of them, which is caused by seeing the barley, by seeing the meat. Because when the dog sees the meat, it wants to eat it. When the horse wants to eat, when the horse sees the barley, it wants to eat it. Okay, but once these are removed from their eyesight, they have no desire for it, or at least their desire for it is decreased. والثالث يضاهي تسليتها بشيء قليل مما يميل إليه طبعها حتى يبقى معها من القوة ما تصبر به على التأديب. And the third method is comparable to offering an animal what they want, but in a limited amount, so that they have enough power to be trained, to be domesticated, to be educated. So, I mean, the horse or the donkey should have some power, so that their owner can educate them, can train them, can domesticate them. If they are completely powerless, okay, they are controlled, but it's impossible to educate them that way. So these are the three ways through which the side that we want to weaken or undermine, is weakened, because as Imam Ghazali said, sabr is required when there's a fight between religious motivation and hedonistic motivation. And sabr means making the religious motivation triumphant over the hedonistic motivation. And how do you do it? You need to empower one side, which is the religious motivation, and undermine the other side, which is the hedonistic motivation. And here he explained what are the things that you need to do to undermine or weaken the hedonistic desires, the nafs, the shahwa. And he mentioned three methods. One is cutting the food, the other staying away from circumstances that provokes the shahwa, and the third one is offering the nafs the halal alternative. And he said offering halal alternative is the most effective method. So now وأما تقوية باعث الدين فإنما تكون بطريقين. But how about empowering the religious motivation? And there are two methods for this. There are two ways for it to do it. So this part is a long part, but at least we can read one of them, inshallah ta'ala. أحدهما, so what's the way to strengthen or empower the religious motivation so that it can defeat the hedonistic motivation? So the first one, إطعامه في فوائد المجاهدة وثمراتها في الدين والدنيا. So supporting it, feeding it with knowledge about the benefits of struggle against nafs, and also the benefits of it in this world and in the hereafter. So basically teaching the person the benefits of struggling against nafs and its fruits in this world and in the hereafter. So, when the person knows the benefits involved in struggle against nafs, then this will really empower the religious motivation. Okay, then the person will be convinced that, okay, mujahada is good. I have to struggle against my desires, because it's good for my deen, it's good for my dunya. He will know these things, otherwise he will find no reason to fight against his hedonistic desires. Why should one fight against his hedonistic desires? If he doesn't know any reason for it, he won't be able to motivate it. But if he's taught the benefits, the positive consequences, the good results of mujahada, struggle against nafs, then he'll be more motivated for this struggle. وذلك بأن يكثر فكره في الأخبار التي أوردناها في فضل الصبر. So this could happen by thinking more about the reports which I have presented above about the virtue of sabr. So Imam Ghazali has already mentioned the virtues of sabr in the earlier sections. So he says, thinking more about the virtues of sabr will really empower the ba'ith al-din, the religious motivation, against hedonistic motivations. وفي حسن عواقبه في الدنيا والآخرة, and also thinking about the good outcomes of sabr in this world and in the hereafter. وفي الأثر أن ثواب الصبر على المصيبة أكثر مما فات. So it is reported from great scholars, from saints, that they said the reward by Allah Ta'ala offered to patience against calamities, difficulties, is more than what one has lost. So you lose something, and then if you show sabr for it, the reward you get from Allah Ta'ala is much bigger than what you lost. Okay, Allah Ta'ala gives you something, and as the reward, and that reward is much bigger than what you have lost. If you show sabr about something you lost or something taken away from you. وأنه بسبب ذلك مربوط بالمصيبة. This is the reason why, people are given calamities, and why? Because Allah Ta'ala gives them some musibat, and they gain more rewards, more than what they have lost. That's why people admire to them. They make ghibta. Ghibta means admiring. So they become admired because of this. إذ فاته ما لا يبقى معه إلا مدة الحياة وحصل له ما يبقى بعد موته أبد الآباد. Because what he lost is something that was going to stay with him during his temporary life on the face of the earth. But what he gained is something that will stay with him after he dies forever. So what he gained is much more important than what he lost. ومن أسلم خسيسا في نفيس فلا ينبغي أن يحزن لفوات الخسيس في الحال. So ومن أسلم خسيسا في نفيس. So if someone exchanged something cheaper with something expensive, so you gave something really cheap and you got something really excellent, very expensive, precious, very valuable, فلا ينبغي أن يحزن لفوات الخسيس في الحال. So that person should not be sorry, should not be sad for what he lost from this cheap and bad quality thing, at the moment. So at the moment you are losing something cheap, bad quality, valueless, but in exchange you are getting something really precious in the akhirah. So thinking about this will empower religious motivation and make somebody have strong sabr. وهذا من باب المعارف. So this is a common knowledge. It's an experienced knowledge, experiential knowledge. وهو من الإيمان. This is a part of Iman. So it's grounded on our faith, because our faith tells us that there is Allah and there is hereafter. If you lose something here, Allah Ta'ala will give you something better in the hereafter, because you abandoned that for His sake. فَتَارَةً يَضْعُفُ وَتَارَةً يَقْوَى. So this feeling in one person sometimes is very strong, but sometimes it's weaker. فَإِنْ قَوِيَ بَعْثِ الدِّينِ. When this feeling of faith, gets stronger, the impact of the religious motivation also gets stronger. وَهَيَّجَهُ تَهْيِيجًا شَدِيدًا. And this feeling makes him get more and more motivated, to do good deeds. وَإِنْ ضَعُفَ ضَعَّفَهُ. But if this feeling becomes weaker in that person, his sabr also gets weaker and his religious motivation also gets weaker. وَإِنَّمَا قُوَّةُ الْإِيمَانِ يُعَبَّرُ عَنْهَا بِالْيَقِينِ. The power of faith is called al-yaqeen, certainty in faith. So decrease and increase is in the yaqeen, the level of certainty. And there is ilm al-yaqeen, there is ayn al-yaqeen, and there is haqq al-yaqeen. So ayn al-yaqeen, the certainty gained by knowing something. Ayn al-yaqeen, certainty gained by seeing something. And haqq al-yaqeen, certainty by experiencing something. So these are the levels of certainty. So the power of Iman is correlated with the level of yaqeen. وهو المحرك لعزيمة الصبر. So al-yaqeen is what motivates people to practice the virtue of sabr, the virtue of sabr. وأقل ما أوتي الناس اليقين وعزيمة الصبر. But very few, there is a very little amount of yaqeen people have, and there is a very little amount of the virtue of sabr people have. So people have very little virtue of patience, and very little certainty in their faith. So that's why, like there's a parallelism, there's a correlation between the level of sabr one has and the level of iman one has, because iman is what makes somebody strong to have sabr. All right, my dear friends, we can stop here. And if Allah Ta'ala gives us good life, good health, we can continue next week also. Jazakumullah khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam, Hujam. Thank you.
Alaikum salam. Thank you very much, Hujam.
مع السلامة مع السلامة.
جزاك الله خيرا أستاذ.
جميعا إن شاء الله تعالى، جميعا إن شاء الله تعالى.
مع السلامة.
مع السلامة.